Hello, everyone. Welcome to 10 Questions on Freight Marketplace. I'm Adrian Gonzalez, founder and host of Talking Logistics, and I'm joined today by an expert on this topic, Sam Pearman, who's product manager for Freight Marketplace at Transporion. Now, we asked you in the audience to submit your questions about Freight Marketplace, and this was a hot topic of conversation at the Transporion Summit back in September, and it remains a hot topic today as both shippers and carriers look for faster, smarter, and more automated ways to match real-time freight demand with capacity. So as always, we received a lot of questions on this topic, but we only have time for 10 today. So I'll pick the ones that that are getting asked the most. So with that, are you ready to get started, Sam?
Yep, let's go.
All right, so let's take a look here. And I was trying to aggregate, some of the questions into groups that, because some of the questions were kind of similar. And we got a lot of questions that I would say were kind of related to almost terminology, because you hear a lot of folks talk about marketplaces and you hear them talk about exchanges. So I guess the first question is, what's the difference between a freight marketplace and a freight exchange platform?
Yes, good question, and I get that question. First is to say that the freight marketplace from Transporion is definitely not a freight exchange platform. It distinguishes itself by focusing on contracted business, while freight exchange platforms typically focus on more the single shipment, spot shipments. And yes, spot shipments can also be done on the freight marketplace, but it goes further than that. Currently, the focus is on single lane events, what you call mini bids. That contain multiple shipments in a certain contract period for a single lane. This is, for example, useful if you have project or seasonal business. Next year, we'll be going even further into the area of developing freight marketplace to cover larger strategic multi-lane tenders as well, and also to cover more modes than road, which it currently does. And this should make it more clear as well that there is a substantial difference between freight marketplace and freight exchange platforms.
Yeah. Mini bids is something that we did research on our end, and it's something that for sure more and more shippers as well as carriers are interested in doing heading into 2024, because of it's one of the lessons learned from the COVID pandemic, that you need to be a little bit more dynamic in the whole procurement process. And that kind of leads to the next question, because there's been a lot of interest in just procurement tools over the past, couple of years, with the ups and downs in the market. And so the question is, how exactly does the freight marketplace differ from other freight procurement tools?
Also a very good question. There's several points here I could mention, but I'll focus on one. In short, many freight procurement tools are built for the internet age. The freight marketplace is built for the data science age. So that's this change in focus. What do I mean with that? In the past, the focus was to move freight procurement very much from offline processes like email, telephone, and Excel that were inefficient and time-consuming, and moving them online with all the benefits that came with that. Now, while this is still important, we see that we need to go further than that. We see that shippers and carriers need to have a procurement process that is faster, more efficient, and this can be achieved by getting more data insights to make more data-driven decisions. And that's where we see the way forwards. For example, I'm talking here about including market prices in the decision-making process. More specifically about including our rate benchmarking product that we have in Transporion in the freight marketplace. Also the possibility to match shippers and carriers better based on their activity and their profiles. And to be able to do all of this, and many more, the tool has to be set up in the right way with a good underlying data structure. And that's exactly what we've done in the freight marketplace. And that's where we see we have a bit of a different approach, or that's sort of a difference that we have to other tools, other procurement tools.
Yeah, no, it sounds like, from my perspective, we've seen this evolution of these tools, and you're right. I mean, we saw some of the early versions of this back in the kind of the .com era. They've been around for a while, but now with the inclusion of the access that we have to much more data to be able to do benchmarking, include benchmarking as part of that, and then data science, all the advancements there, and incorporating that into the process, I think has been important. So we have shifting gears a little bit now. Talking about, from this, obviously from a shipper perspective, which carriers have access to the transports I offer? Is it limited to those activated for my company, or does it include all carriers registered on the freight marketplace platform?
Yeah, this is also a great point to go into, because we have a bit of a different logic in the freight marketplace. We're also going a different way. Generally, all carriers that have access to the freight marketplace will see all events from the shippers. But the shippers can define which carriers have full access to all details of that event, and which carriers see the event but have a limited view of the details. Now, what does that mean? Carriers that are not specifically added by the shipper to an event will not see the details of the shipper. So it'll be an anonymized version. So like shipper name, contact information, or the exact location of pickup and delivery won't be visible, but they'll see all relevant information that allows them to submit an offer anyway. Like they'll see the country and a 2-digit zip code of the pickup and delivery location. And they see all the requirements and the volume information. And this allows them to still submit an offer. Why are we doing that? This allows us to see the carriers to see and offer on more events than they normally could if they were only invited to the ones, and to showcase themselves to shippers by submitting offers. At the same time, it gives the shippers the advantage to receive more offers and find new carriers that they previously were not aware of, but at the same time without revealing all details about themselves, all their identity, all the information about themselves. So we see a benefit here for both sides.
Yeah, it sounds like it's a win-win for both, really, because you're allowing, carriers visibility or to discover potential new business for them without compromising the shipper's identity at the front end if they haven't been specifically invited. But from the shipper standpoint, it provides them with the opportunity perhaps to find new potential partners from those that might be interested in submitting bids as well. So I kind of a related question here. Can I integrate my existing carrier pool into the freight marketplace and decide when to engage with an extended pool of carriers?
Let me split that answer. The first part, absolutely yes. We can definitely add the existing carrier pools of our shipper customers. We want that as well. And it's simple for new carriers to get access. And new carriers will get an invitation from us. They can sign up and start using the freight marketplace right away. One thing I would add here is, in general, we see the advantage of marketplace in having a mix of known carriers and new carriers. So from a perspective of shippers, it absolutely makes sense having my existing carriers in there. But we also see the great benefit of the freight marketplace in finding new carriers, which sort of touches on the point that we just talked about as well. The second part of the question very much touches the last question as well, and that is, I can decide who sees all details of the event and which carriers only see part of the event. So in this example, I would say for my own pool, I can give them full access to it, and for the extended pool, they get the anonymized view. And with that, I sort of have the best of both worlds from our perspective.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And let's see. Well, here's a topic that is, always comes up in anything talking about transportation these days, because it's a hot topic in supply chain and logistics in general. That's sustainability. And so someone's asking, is sustainability integrated into the freight marketplace as part of this whole process? Yeah, that's a great topic we have also for the future, and that's where we're going in the freight marketplace. We're sort of starting off with that topic, where we noticed there's so much you can do there. The way we're starting off with it is to be able to calculate the emissions for events. This means, more precisely, that means calculating the kilogram CO2 amount for a bidding event based on the lane that is in that event. And it's actually based on several factors, like the distance from pickup to delivery, the fuel type used. So is it a diesel, gas, or even an electric truck? What are the emission standard classes? Like, is it a Euro 5 or Euro 6 vehicle? If we're looking at Europe, in the US, it would be other types. But using all these factors to calculate a CO2 kilogram amount. And we can even allow the carriers to put that in their offer, so they can decide what fuel type, what Euro emission standard class the vehicle has. And based on that, we calculate the emissions. And this way, not only we have this as a nice information to have, but it can also be used by the shipper to make awarding decisions that are not only based on price, but also emission amount, to make the decision which carrier should I go for. Yeah, no, and certainly, with all the regulations that are, coming into place, not only in Europe but here in the United States as well, certainly sustainability, CO2 emissions, greenhouse gas emissions are going to become a much more critical factor in the transportation procurement and transportation, measurement and reporting standpoint as well. To your last point there, that kind of brings me to kind of another question here. So sustainability could become one of those factors that you make decisions on. So the question is, what does multi-dimensional negotiations mean? Does it mean negotiating beyond just price?
Yeah, it's sort of a fancy word, multi-dimensional negotiation. It basically means what we sort of touched on already, is that I can negotiate on more than just price. Price is always included in a bidding event, and let's be honest, it will still be the most important, most likely. But additionally, I can also include other factors like emissions, but also capacities and also soon transit times, and include that in the offering and counter offering. So in the negotiation part with the carriers. And this means carriers can basically put their price in, we can calculate a CO2 amount, they can give us their capacity, their transit time, and all of these elements can be collected, and the shipper can use these elements to decide, okay, which carrier should I go for, or I negotiate them on, and I can compare these offers with each other. Which of these elements are included is actually up to the shipper, by the way. They can decide, do they want to negotiate on emissions or not? Do they want to include capacities, transit times? The minimum is always price, obviously.
Right. And I think you're right. I think, cost is always going to be, price is always going to be the dominant factor there. But I think, more sophisticated, shippers are really looking for that broader, view and decision factors, because obviously service is very important. And as we just talked about before, sustainability is becoming much more important as well. So I think we're going to see that balancing act between all these factors becoming more and more important moving forward. Question here about kind of the scope of Freight Marketplace. Is it available? Is it available only for road transport? Do you have any plans for the ocean and rail?
Yes, it's true. Currently, Freight Marketplace is focused on road transport only, and mainly on FTL as well. That's sort of the first mode we wanted to focus on, since it's the biggest part of the transport sector. But I totally get that question, and we hear that quite often. Do we have plans to extend it? And the answer is yes. We want to go into other modes. In 2024, we're planning, or we're not only planning, we're going to expand into other modes like ocean and air, and also rail, and maybe more. But definitely going into the direction of ocean, air, and rail to include that as well.
Great. I mean, I think that, I think there's a lot of learning to be done in this first iteration. So I think you'll whatever learnings you have, obviously will be able to apply as you move on into some of these other modes. A question here about what is the cost of using Freight Marketplace for shippers and carriers?
Of course, totally valid question, and one that everyone will be interested in. And it's also a bit different also to our existing tool. The Freight Marketplace is free for shippers to use. And for the carriers, there'll be a low 100 euros monthly membership fee, or $100 in the US. So that means we have this two-sided pricing scheme with shippers for free and 100 euros monthly membership fee for carriers. Carriers, there will also be granted a 30-day free of charge testing period as well, so they can test it at the beginning free of charge. We see this as an advantage because there's low barrier to use Marketplace. Because it's free for shippers and a low cost for carriers. I will add as well that in addition, we over time want to add more and more value-added features to the Freight Marketplace that go beyond sort of the standard scope. One example being the rate benchmarking topic, like including market prices in the bidding events. Such value-added features can come with an additional price in future. That can happen as well.
Yeah. No, I think I think it's important. You're trying to create, liquidity, if you will, in any kind of marketplace, and try to get, reach a critical mass of both shippers and carriers. So I think that the pricing makes a lot of sense. Certainly, there's always a lot of questions with any kind of technology these days around, data privacy, and certainly when it comes to transportation procurement and what people pay and what carriers offer. Sometimes it's sensitive information. I mean, how do you ensure data privacy on the Freight Marketplace?
Well, that's always a hot topic. When it comes to data privacy in general, every user entering a marketplace has to accept our terms of use before entering. So we have that sort of as a basis in general. When it comes to the data which is shared between shippers and carriers in the events or in the marketplace in general, one thing we touched on was the ability to define how much the counterparty sees of oneself. So that was sort of with the anonymized events. So a shipper can decide who has full access to the details of the event. Additional functionalities that we're going to be adding fairly soon. I'll mention two here. One is on shipper side, we want to add the option that carriers accept conditions before entering an event. So they can accept, for example, an NDA before opening an event. Then you have sort of a small agreement between shipper and carriers when they're negotiating in an event. That's one thing where we want to go in that direction. And also on carrier side, we have profiles where carriers can showcase their capabilities. And there too, we want to have options that the carrier can define who can see what information, what is maybe more sensitive and only goes to shippers that I'm already working with, what is general information that anyone can see. So those are more and more functionalities being added to make sure I have control over the data I'm sharing.
Great. I think that will be welcomed by both the shippers and the carriers. All right. So, like I always do at the end of these episodes, I kind of reserve the 10th question to kind of something completely different than what we're talking about, kind of a fun and silly question in some ways, but just to end on a fun note. So here's my question to you, Sam. What do you prefer to drink in the morning? Are you a coffee person, a tea person, a soda person, or something else?
Good question. Easy answer, coffee person. Probably also the boring answer, because that's where a lot of people go, but definitely coffee. I enjoy making a good cup of coffee in the morning, not because it's caffeine and I want to wake up, but because I like drinking it. So definitely a coffee person.
Now, is it, do you drink it black? Is it espresso? Is it cappuccino? Because it's very...
It's a cappuccino style, so I'm going for coffee. As an Englishman, I should really be up for a good cup of black English tea in the morning, but coffee is my preferred, but not as a black coffee, but more as a cappuccino.
Yes, well, I'm in the same boat. I'm a coffee person as well, but I probably do it more for the caffeine than the actual taste. Although I do enjoy the taste as well. So Sam, great. I mean, that's all the time we have for today. So Sam, again, thank you for joining us in this lightning round, conversation on Freight Marketplace. And thank you also to everyone who submitted questions. Although we couldn't get to all of them, today, I hope you learned something, new today about Freight Marketplace that can, help benefit your transportation operations. And I look forward to seeing you all on the next 10 Questions episode. Thank you.
Thank you very much.